Boarding schools represent one of the most painful chapters in Indigenous history. These institutions, established in the late 19th century by the US and Canadian governments in partnership with religious organizations, were designed to forcibly assimilate Indigenous children into Euro-American culture. Their purpose was clear: to erase Indigenous identities, languages, and traditions. The idea behind these schools was rooted in colonial ideologies. In the United States, figures like Richard Henry Pratt, founder of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, championed the belief of civilizing Indigenous children, stating the goal was to kill the Indian and save the man. In Canada, residential schools were created under federal policies, such as the Indian Act, with many operated by Christian churches. These systems sought to strip children of their culture and integrate them into settler society. Children were often taken from their families without consent, sometimes dragged away by force. Once at the schools, their hair was cut, traditional clothing was confiscated, and they were forbidden to speak their languages or practice their cultures. These rules were often enforced with brutal physical punishments. The conditions were inhumane. Overcrowding, malnutrition, and rampant disease turned the schools into places of suffering. Thousands of children died from neglect or abuse and were buried in unmarked graves near the schools, far from their families and homelands. The emotional scars were just as deep. Survivors often recount the trauma of being separated from their loved ones and enduring constant humiliation, beatings, and attempts to destroy their cultural identity. This trauma has been passed down through generations, leaving lasting pain in many Indigenous communities. Boarding schools were not centers of education but tools of cultural destruction, aiming to strip Indigenous peoples of their identity. Yet, despite this dark legacy, Indigenous communities have shown remarkable resilience. Today, they are reclaiming their languages, traditions, and histories, ensuring that the strength of their ancestors endures. We need to ensure these stories are never forgotten. Like and follow to honor the resilience of Indigenous peoples and their fight for justice.